Welcome to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast. And today I've got a guest on the show. Back in the day, I probably should have pre-framed this. You were actually my first ever mentor I ever worked with. So it's it's awesome to reconnect and rekindle that
Full circle.
relationship. Yeah. Life comes full circle, man.
Thanks for having me
Uh,
on, man. I appreciate it.
yeah, no worries, man. So before we dive into some of the nitty gritty stuff, then Pete. Maybe tell a little bit of the audience of what do you do for work, where you're currently based at, and we'll kind of go from there.
For sure, man. I'm a dad to twins. I have boy-girl twins. They are almost turning 12, so into high school this year. I'm a fitness coach. I run an online personal training company. I've been in the fitness industry in various ways for over 20 years. I was a PT and gym owner for 12 years. Then, where we met, I was a business coach, business mentor for the fitness industry. And, in the more recent history, I've gone back to actually coaching fitness, which I'm really enjoying. I'm on the Gold Coast in Australia. And when I'm not working, I'm with my twins. I'm surfing. I'm very slowly progressing in jiu-jitsu, as we were chatting about before we
Yeah,
went live. Um, and yeah, that's everything in a little bio overview.
yeah, nice, man. Nice. I know when we first met, and I know it's a story that you tell quite a lot, and I'm pretty sure you still tell it now. It's obviously you were PTing, you got into owning a gym, and I believe as that was happening, you realized that you were going to be having twins.
Hmm.
How like we so for context, like our second kid's actually on the way. We're due in March, so that's exciting.
For sure.
But how did you deal with the fact that all of a sudden you're not just dealing with a kid, but you're dealing with two newborns, and
Mm,
obviously the gym was just starting to really kind of pick up steam a little bit there. Like
for
what was
sure.
through your mind?
Well, naivety is a good thing when you have twins coming. I didn't really know what I was in for, so I was very excited. I always wanted to be a dad. Um, I was very young. I was 26 when I found out. So I was excited. I was nervous. What was interesting uh, at that time, a lot of males around me sort of had this. I'm not sure what it's like in New Zealand, but maybe it's a global thing. A lot of men around me who were at the time in their late 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s, who were sort of like, oh, your life's going to be very different now. Your life's going to change. Enjoy this freedom while you can. And there's almost this like story collectively that your life's over a little bit. So I was sort of, I remember being quite torn. I was very excited and pumped for it, but I also had these sort of dudes 10, 15, 20 years old are sort of giving me that story. So I was very torn at the time. But yeah, it was mostly excitement. There was a bit of nerves there. I definitely felt that I wished I were further ahead financially and had a bit more security. That was sort of an underlying fear. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's a pretty common thing for new dads to think that. But yeah, it was definitely a mixed bag of a lot a lot of things I was feeling.
Yeah, I think the whole financial thing is probably quite synonymous to most dads. I was actually speaking to another guest, would have been just a couple of days ago actually, when we were sort of talking about at some point mum's gonna have to take time off from work or whatever that might look like, and
Mm.
as the proverbial male figure in the household, it's almost like your duty to ensure that there's food on the table. And I think, to your point, when you're quite young and when you know that things are going to happen, it tends to put quite a lot of strain on you. I think definitely not something that a lot of people talk about. Maybe now, but definitely back then, I'm sure it's not really a talking point. It's more like a yep, just man up kind of thing. It's like yeah, I get that, but it's tough, especially with twins.
For sure. Yeah. I like, don't get me wrong. I also had some great influences around me and some people who were really fantastic. But I do remember I was talking to my brother-in-law,
Mm.
who they've just had their first child now, and he sort of shared something similar, and it reminded me of that actually. That the story from a lot of men is like, oh, enjoy it while you can. But I did also have some, some really positive, strong influences around me as well. But I think that financial pressure is a real thing because I think in a lot of men we want to look after those people around us, and that means we don't want our partner or wife to have to go back to work due to financial pressure. We want them to go back
Mm.
when they want to go back. I think that's a very common thread.
Yeah, that's always a tricky one for sure. And then I remember kind of that story arc kind of happening, and then obviously kids came, joyful, and then obviously decided that the gym wasn't a thing for you guys anymore.
Mm,
I think you also mentioned at that time your ex-wife or ex-partner back then. I think you guys sort of decided to call it quits as well. I think that was kind of around that time.
yeah,
It would have been quite tough, I guess, as like a fairly new dad, where I guess your kids were not even in kindergarten back then when all of that sort of happened, right? It was quite early into their lives
mm,
when all of that kind of blowed over, right? Like how did you go about that? Because that would be like mentally tough for anyone, not
yeah,
just financially, but kids. Like now I've got to deal with that shit as well.
for sure, man. I say that I had kids, got married, and got divorced before my frontal lobe was fully developed, and
Yeah.
it was a shit time for sure. It was a really shit time. My health markers were shot. I was running on caffeine and alcohol a lot to wind down at night. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. You've got the normal sleep deprivation and looking after two. They were about 18 months. Two dependents who need a lot from you, plus
Mm.
in emotion, a relationship breaking down, plus transitioning out of a business. There's a lot to deal with. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I don't think I dealt with it that well, to be honest. Like yeah, I used alcohol most nights to switch off. I was not dealing with the root cause. I didn't actually sit and feel what I needed to sit and feel. I was like keeping myself distracted and busy and chasing new things. Um, and a mate actually pulled me up. He's like, "Dude, it's Tuesday night. Why are you drinking? Like, why are you drinking on a Tuesday night? Aren't you up early for work tomorrow?" Because I went back to PTing after the gym, and I got quite defensive with him, which is often a sign that somebody's hit a
Hit a nerve.
trigger or a truth spot. Yeah, I got quite defensive with him, but when I calmed down a few days, I think later I realized that he's got a point. Like, why the fuck am I drinking on a Tuesday night? I need to be rubric in my life and being sensible. And I was just like, not. I had a lot of little boy energy back then. I just wasn't dealing with stuff that needed to be dealt with.
Yeah, I think ironically, I guess you said like the whole naiveness back then as well. That's definitely the thing, right?
Mm,
Like I'm young, I'm able to deal with all that. I can kind of soldier on, and things will be fine. But at some point, you have to really dig deep and deal with the problems internally, rather than just sort
sure.
of sweep it under the rug. Because eventually, it's going to boil over, and then what, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I didn't deal with that stuff at all. I jumped into a relationship pretty soon, and at the time I was like, oh, it's fine. I'm just having some fun. I'm going through a rough patch, but I was just really not dealing with the reality. And it was funny because I didn't deal with the marriage breaking down and went straight into this fresh relationship. When that girl broke it off with me, which she should have because I was a 27-year-old with 18-month twins living
Yeah.
at my mum's house. Like she should have broken up with me. But when she broke up with me, I felt so heartbroken. And what I later learned was that was actually me processing the marriage breakdown. I wasn't heartbroken from a 4-month fling ending, but you know,
Mm.
when she broke it off with me, I was actually for the first time stopping and reflecting. I'm like, hey, this hasn't gone to plan. It's okay to feel this, but at the time, I felt more broken from the 4-month relationship ending than the 8-year relationship ending. But that was just me actually feeling what I needed to be felt prior to that. And from there, like uh, 2 years of therapy every single week, and a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes there. But um, yeah, I wouldn't suggest jumping into things straight away. Like, if anything, to stop and to feel it, and to actually feel what you need to feel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Then I suppose as the kids start to grow up a little bit more, they would get to a point. I guess they would realize that, hey, actually, especially I don't know how kids develop, but I'm guessing it gets to a point where it's like they start to realize they see mum and dad at different times.
Mm,
Whereas I guess with some older kids who go through parents splitting, it's possibly a lot easier to kind of get the verbal message across. Like for example, if a kid's like 12 or 13 and the parents had to split, at that point they're at least comprehensive of language.
yes.
But when they're 3, 4, they're only really starting to learn to communicate, like pointing and talking.
Hmm.
And I don't know where their head's at, but I'm sure they would potentially feel like, oh, like, why does all my friends have their parents living together, whereas mine's a bit separate? How have you how did you deal with that to obviously maintain that healthy relationship with your kids? And because I'm fairly confident they are pretty aware that yourself and their mum are not together anymore.
Mm. Yeah. I'm in no means an expert at this, but I think what worked for us is we were both willing to communicate. The thing is, with anyone you have kids with, if the marriage breaks up, you never really divorce someone if you share kids with them, you know. But we've always communicated. Maybe it took 6 to 12 months, but after that point, we've always communicated well. We've always been present, both of us, at the kids' special events, birthday parties early on, and our school things. Um, and we have a very functional relationship now. Like, it's a friendship now, right? But
Mm.
at the time, I remember when friends that I've known for a long time got married, I remember some of them, their friends who parents were divorced, the parents still couldn't get in a family photo together at their son's wedding. And that sort of always stood out to me of what not to do. So, and most of the credit should go to my ex-wife for this, because she was great in leading a lot of this, but we were both willing to put that aside for the kids, and to be there for what's important for them. Um, Therapy was incredibly valuable, and looking at why I would react or get defensive or lash out, and to go deeper into the psychology of that was incredibly helpful for me. And what I might add, though, is it was 2 years of therapy. I think some people, from men that I hear, it's like, oh, I went to therapy but it didn't work. I was like, well, how many times did you go? Oh, I did 2 sessions, but he said this or she said this. I'm like, well, you wouldn't go to jiu-jitsu twice, or you wouldn't go to the gym twice and complain you can't do a double bodyweight back squat. It takes time. So do whatever someone needs to get through that and work through that. And it is working through that. I don't think a therapist, the same as a trainer or a coach, doesn't do the work for you. Often they'll highlight things you need to do more of. So I had to learn how to communicate better, and to communicate more clearly, and to, share what I needed so that I could be a good dad. And I'm still figuring that out. I definitely don't have it all figured out. Please don't think that on this chat. But um, hopefully, if anyone's listening to this in a similar situation, they have a partner or ex-partner who's also willing to communicate and work through it. But that's, I think, always thinking of what's in the best interest of the kid or of the child or children. Um, but it's a tricky thing, man, because you're dealing with the emotions of a breakup, whilst, especially when they're super young, having to talk very transactional, day-to-day routine stuff about children, paying for things, dealing with things, times they get sick. You're having to balance that, and at the same time dismantle and disconnect from a relationship. It's a very tricky thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah, that's yeah. Especially I think like emotionally, you can only segment that much in your head. until like it starts bleeding into
Mm,
each compartment. You go like you don't really know what's kind of going on at that point.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But it does look like at least I know everyone says that like obviously social media is only 10, maybe 20% of what life really is, but it does seem like now that you've got if I would even say so, like a very strong, good relationship with your kids after all this time. And I think it's also a testament to what you said there. I think having to kind of put the ego, for a better word, aside for the kids, like that,
Yeah,
your my relationship and your relationship is one thing, but that's between us, and the kids should kind of stay separate from it as much as possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, man. But yeah, co-parenting, it's a tricky it's a tricky thing to navigate, and I think every couple has to find what works for them. There's some incredible benefits to it. I think nothing beats a solo family at home, but there are some benefits to co-parenting,
Mm.
and yeah, I think we also have to take into account like the nervous system of the kids and the safety, how safe and comfortable the kids feel in both homes. So some simple
Mm.
things like they would bring a pillow and their teddy bear at a young age that would travel with them, so they always had that to comfort them. Things in their room might start to come with them to both homes, so they feel familiar. We would get the same toothbrushes in both homes, so that felt familiar. Because I think I didn't know much about that back then, but I think that's really important. Like having them feel secure, safe, familiarity. I think for kids is a big thing. So that stuff can be communicated and worked through with parents. I think is such a good thing. So the kid feels supported.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, that's cool, man. And obviously, all through all of that, you have obviously tried to maintain a good, healthy relationship with your kids. And then we kind of went into this little story arc of getting back into PT, trying to get back on your 2 feet.
Mm,
Um, you mentioned at the start of this conversation as well. We started as a PT, owned a business, went into business mentoring, and back into PT again. How do you find juggling like the balance? Because like so to maybe put into perspective,
yeah.
maybe again it's my naiveness that hasn't caught up to me yet yet, but in at least in our household with family, it's like cool. Mum looks after Henry and Marcus eventually. I work. There's certain things that I will do, dishes, cooking, whatever. She will be sort of the primary person to look after. And the age is sort of that 2-year old mark within that stage.
Mm,
But I can assume to your point with co-parenting, there's some benefits, but it can get quite tricky because some days they'll be like you have the kids or she has the kids, and then I suppose that's maybe potentially why you kind of went down the route of a lot more online stuff. Like I guess like I want to kind of pick your brain on like how did you find balance between work and being and doing going through all of that, because I know
yeah.
a lot of parents who go through divorces don't necessarily just have a problem with trying to wrestle with who gets the kids, but also has a really big problem of like wrestling on the financial thing, which was already a burden to start with, and then now it's even more of a big thing. It's like, ooh, I can't work today, but then you've got the kids today. It's like, oh fuck, like, what do I do?
For
Yeah,
sure, man.
how did you like maneuver through that all?
Post post having a gym, I started to explore ways that weren't just swapping time for money. As a PT, as a gym owner, uh, I was in the gym 4:45 a.m. 5 mornings a week, sometimes 6 mornings a week, and often coming back at night as well. So once that chapter closed, I was exploring different models, right? So I never wanted to be a business coach. I went to um, like an education weekend for personal trainers and strength and conditioning coaches, and the guy running the show was a genius, but was mostly disorganized, like a lot of geniuses are, like just a bit of a hot mess, you know.
Yeah.
And it was after that he kind of convinced me to come on board and help with some business development stuff, which led into business coaching. But that allowed me to work from a laptop and work online. Now, I became obsessed with productivity and through various sources learned a system that worked for me. And one of the best things was to wake up early, keep your phone off, do 1 to 2 hours of deep work. And I would enter this work state most mornings, and I was like, oh, I can get like 4 hours of work done in 60 minutes if I'm well rested, if I'm hydrated, if I'm focused, if I have headphones and a laptop and my surroundings are clear. That's kind of a recipe for like training myself to sit down, drop in to get shit done. And I found, and I think this will relate to a lot of busy dads, whether it's getting your workout in the morning or getting a work block in the morning before the chaos of the day
Yeah.
begins.
Yeah.
And as a co-parent, you might have time that you're completely away from parent responsibilities, at least like day-to-day stuff. But then you have times where they wake up and sleep at yours, and everything in between sunrise and sunset is your responsibility too. So it's like really being disciplined with your time. That was
Mm.
the only thing that got me through. Learning how to time block, learning how not to be distracted and not to multitask, turning my phone off, really putting the blinders on. If I can just do one thing today in the next hour, what would that be to move business forward? Right? Because as a business owner, whether you're a business owner or you work for somebody, there's so many things you could be doing, but there's only a few things that actually like move things forward. Same as
Yeah.
in the gym, there's so many things you could be doing, but like, what's your goal? What's going to actually move the needle? So I had to learn pretty quickly how to do that, um, which was everything. Because if the kids are sick, or I mean, you know what it's like if, um, especially when you're on your own, if stuff happens, you know, before you know it, it's 3 p.m. You've had 4 shots of coffee and no food because you're unorganized, and like the chance of getting work done is you've kind of
Zero. Because then
zero.
at bedtime.
Yeah, from 3 p.m. to bedtime is like even harder. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's it's partly a discipline thing, but I think it's also just learning the skill of sitting down, having a, whether you're in a cafe or a home office, but having that practice of headphones, music, maybe some triggers that help drop you into state, and then just sitting down and putting your ass in a chair and getting something done.
Yeah. Having like a bit of a mantra, kind of just like lock you in for a couple, like just
Yeah,
something quick and easy, just
yeah,
in and out kind of thing.
for sure. And I think like it's easy in that case to be like, oh, I can't do this because I've got XYZ reasons. And I was like constantly on this journey of self-talk, being like, no, it's not I can't do it because of the twins. I need to do it because of the twins. That's the reason, not the excuse. And I think, at least for me, that little like subtle, constant reframing was really helpful too.
Yeah. Interesting point there as well, because there's definitely something that I came to realize. How old is he? 23, 23 months? Yes, turning two. Came to realize with, I guess, within the last couple of years, it's like, I'm sure we had chats about this before, even before I became a parent, right?
Mm.
It's like the whole like, or like why are you doing this, like the deeper reasons and stuff like that. But there's a, and I've been telling this to everyone. It's like I can tell you what a parent feels like, but you can't really put it to words until it actually happens. And then once you become a parent, like there's like a switch that kind of turns on, and you're almost willing to do anything for your kids, and it kind of almost becomes that driving force behind a lot of the things that you kind of want to do but you're scared to do, but then all of a sudden you're not just put in a position back up against the wall and I have to do it. It's like it's not just for you anymore. Like you literally have to do it for your kids. And people will say like, oh, you can do it for your partner, for your wife, but it's like, yeah, but when you have kids, it feels different. There's just something primal about it. It's just like it's just not the same. Like you will go to the ends of the world to do anything for them. And I think like it's hard to tell. Obviously the podcast is about parenting. I'm
Mm,
sure some people who listen to this might not be parents, but it's one of those things where it's like it's so hard to give you that emotion of what it feels like until you have kids, and then all of a sudden you're like, I get it.
for sure. It's one of those
Yeah,
things, like you said, it's hard to, like, how do you describe a color? You know, like it's just hard until you're in it or you see it. It's just very hard to appreciate it.
yeah, I think yeah, appreciate that's actually the word.
Mm.
Yeah,
What do
yeah,
you
yeah.
wish, or if you could go back, what do you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Ooh, I think like what would I wish I knew? I guess well, I'll probably share two. One's probably more of a joke, but it's like the prenatal classes will only you only take like 10% of it.
Hmm.
They tell you a lot of shit, but in the end of the day, like when shit hits the fan, like um, you just got to do what you got to do, you know. And a friend of mine quote he kind of gave me the advice of so for context, I think in the first 8 months, I'd say I'm fairly confident, possibly even nine. I think I'd argue 90% of the time Henry needs to sleep on someone.
Mm.
So I was essentially the bed for essentially 8 to 9 months consistently. Like I'd say like 5 out of 7 nights a week.
Hmm.
That was me, and that was definitely not something that I was told. Like you put the baby down and wait and all. It's like no, you just got to do what you got to do. And I think something that he said was like, hey, whatever whatever that you need to do to get some type of sleep, you just do that. So that was like I guess a bit of a joke, but probably the more serious one with like what I wished I'd know is I think kind of almost to your point, like people say it's life changing, but I really wished I was told like the analogy I've been using quite a lot is it's not a new chapter of a book, it's just a completely separate book.
Mm.
You're not turning over a new chapter of a new book of finding out what happens next. It's literally like book on the shelf. I'm going to go to the other end of the library and pick up a whole brand new book.
Hmm.
And no one really kind of told me that because everyone said, "Oh, to your point, right? Appreciate life now because life's going to be different." But what's different? Like, is it just like a couple things different? Is it a lot of things different?
Hmm.
Because like a different chapter of a different book is going to have a different content, but it's literally just a completely different thing. Like pre-parents and once you get a kid, it's like Jesus, like just not the same. Full stop. I wish I was
Yeah,
taught that. I would have been a little bit more like, yeah, okay.
I think everyone, the common thing from mum and dad, parents that I hear is like, oh, what did I do? What did I do with that time I had pre kids? Like what did we do with all this free time?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you kind of look back, you're like, oh my God, like, I could have done so much more.
Mm. It's
I
funny
think
though,
it's,
on that.
yeah,
Like some days I'll do the double school run, the pick up and drop off and pick up. Other days I'll do one or none. And sometimes, man, the days that I do the double run are more productive. I get more done.
yeah. I get you. I
Because
get you.
if I don't go to the gym at 12 and out of there at 1:15, I don't get a workout in. Whereas on my other days, I'm like, oh, it's 4 p.m. Might go to the gym soon. Like there's not that constraint. So in many ways, it's like if you want the saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. There's some truth to that because you have it. The constraint forces you to be more on your shit.
Yeah, for sure. I think like I think maybe more so with I don't know. I was gonna say more so with the toddler stage, but I guess every stage is quite different. Yeah, to your point, I definitely will agree. Like reflecting back on life before parents, and I think all parents say the same thing. It's like, man, like I had so much time before kids,
Mm.
and like 99 of the parents that I know say that.
Yeah.
But it's also not something that you could really change. Kind of like to my point, like I wish I knew that life was going to be this different. Like,
Mm,
I wish someone would actually tell me like this is going to be what it is. So yeah, it's crazy.
hmm
Yeah, man. So 12, two twins, 12 years old. So basically 12 years into parenthood now.
mm.
What's one takeaway so far in the 12-year stint of this uh, career that will never truly end? Some will
That's
call it.
right. What's one takeaway? I mean, there's a lot of things. Something that's coming to mind now is now they will just say it outright. But if I go back 5, 6, 7 years, they could sense when I was not really present with them and a little bit distracted. If I
Mm.
was on my phone or if I was trying to do a bit of work when I was with them, I think we got to give kids credit for being incredibly intuitive and smart at a young age, even if they can't communicate it, that they will feel your presence. And I think, um, to your partner, your wife, ex-wife, current wife, like the woman that you're in a relationship with, will feel this as well, right? They feel a safety and a level of trust when you are fully present. So what did I learn from parenting? The thing that on this thread, it's like, what do I need to do or get off my plate or sit with or deal with or decision to make so that I can be more present around them?
Mm.
Because even from a really young age, before they could speak their needs and communicate properly, they could feel when I wasn't there fully. They would play up more. They would act up more. They would target me more for more attention. Because I was like half doing something over here, as opposed to just being and being with them. And not all kids, but my experience is they will act up a lot less and do sort of um, throw tantrums or whatever less if I'm just fully with them. They'll feel it.
Yeah, especially to think like I'm sure there's a lot more research these days, but definitely the observation is they'll tug at you more, they'll whinge a lot more.
Mm,
But it's also one of the funny things, at least for our kid. Like I try to be as present as possible, so that when I tell them I'm going, there's less of a fight for it. So when my wife has to go out for whatever, meet friends, have a meal, like go for her scans because the second one's coming, it's a
mm,
lot less of a fight, a lot less of a fit because I think she obviously tries her best to spend as much time as possible. And I feel like if parents don't do that as much, then I guess that's where you kind of see the real big like tantrums when you actually have to leave them for I guess like first day of kindergarten, right? Like that's always the hardest. To my understanding, that's the hardest, which I'm not looking forward to, but it has to happen.
it has to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it, man. That's cool, man.
And I think they're always watching, that they're watching how your relationship is, whether the kids'
Mm.
parents are together or not, they're still watching and modeling that. They're modeling how we treat our health, how we treat exercise. I think kids should see us work out, should see us sweat, should see us do those things because they will copy what we do, not what we say. And like I still um, there's I said something to my daughter. What was it? Oh, it was something I was into. I think I was making a particular food. Like I think I was bulk cooking some chili mince or something. And she said, "Daddy, that looks like dog food." And I said, "Hallie, don't yuck someone's yum." And meaning like if someone likes something, that's their thing, whatever. And this was months ago. This was before Christmas. And then the other day, she said, I'm going to a shopping center with my friends. And I knew that she was there yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. So 3 days in a row at a shopping center. I was like, oh, Hallie, it's a beautiful day. Don't you want to go to the beach? And she said, Daddy, don't yuck someone's yum. And I was like, man,
Right.
you got me. And I was like, all right, Yeah, I can't be mad at that because she's right. But I think
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they are watching and listening and picking up on so much that we don't realize. So Joe Rogan has that bit where he talks about like, what if a cameraman was following you around all day? How would you act? How would you do the little things? How would you train? How would you eat? I think like as parents, we have that video camera in the kids, is they're picking up on all those little things.
yeah. I think that's a really good point. Like, obviously, lead by example part, that's very important, but also the fact that they pick up some of the smallest things,
Mm,
like how you walk. And I do realize that with Henry, like he does walk a certain way, and I'm like, why is that? And then my wife will point out, well, because you kind of walk like that. I'm like, oh shit.
hmm,
Well, it's I guess that's it. But yeah, like it definitely is a very interesting time. I guess as for me at least with toddlers, because at that age they're always learning new. Everything's new. Nothing is boring, and you kind of almost have to be very careful on what you do, at least in front of them.
mm, for
Like,
sure.
yeah, because if it's like if you can't have TV time, I'm not gonna look at my phone. Like if not, they'll get to a point where it's like, well, you're doing that, but I'm doing this. Once they start getting a bit more articulate with their words, and you're like, I wonder where I get that from, and then you kind of like,
Kids are
yeah,
smart, man. I've witnessed this in various friends that I know with kids, where one parent, I don't think this is gender specific, but one parent will be like, "Hey, if you don't do that, I'm gonna insert punishment. Remove your iPad. You're not gonna get dessert, whatever." And those kids know that that parent's full of shit. They'll keep pushing. But when the other parent says, "Hey, little Johnny, if you do that, I'm removing your iPad," and they immediately stop. Kids have this memory, like if you follow through and if you're actually in integrity with your word or not.
yeah,
It's an incredible gift that they, I think, shine back to adults. It's like I've seen that happen so many times, and maybe parent one who has to yell and keep escalating these threats, the kids know that based on the track record, that parent's not going to follow through with that. But if the second parent with zero um, reactivity in their voice, they can just say it as calmly as I'm speaking now. Hey, if you do that, I'm going to remove your iPad for the weekend, or you're not going to watch Bluey tonight for X number of days. They only have to witness that actually happening once to remember,
mm,
and that just blows my mind. Like kids, they just know. They know who's full of shit, and they know who's in integrity with their word. They wouldn't use that language, of course, but they know based on the track record how someone's going to behave.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why I ask my mum when I was younger certain things and why I ask my dad certain things. Because I know that there's a track record of what things will get green lighted by what parent. It's how you get out of shit. I guess for you, like it'll be quite hard because obviously, like yourself and your mum don't live together, but they could probably get away with a little bit more, somewhat, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
It's cool, man. All right, man. Well, we're just about trying to wrap this all up. Those are really some really cool points, man. And I think like again to my initial point, I've known you for so long. It's also really cool to kind of see like the progression of your kids from 5 all the way to you know finishing high school, going into teenage years now. The the hardest part apparently,
Mm.
according to most parents, that's the hardest part. Allegedly. So, where can people find you, man? Where can people learn more about what you do, obviously, and maybe kind of follow along this journey of yours?
Yeah, man. Instagram's probably the best place. I put out most of my fitness content on there, but also share some personal stuff. Um, no YouTube or podcast yet. That's coming later in the year for some longer term stuff. But I'd say connect with me on Instagram. If you search for my name, Pete Tansley, that's my username as well. It should be fairly easy to find. Let me know you came from this show, and yeah, we'd love to connect with anybody on there.
Yeah, cool, mate. All right. Well, if you guys liked the episode, like, share, subscribe. I guess that's kind of how people end these things, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.